Let us offer our consecration to the Lord. Lord, we offer up to you this day, and we ask that we glorify your name. We ask that we look forward to you as the one truth, and we ask that we seek to follow you in all that we do. And we ask this through Christ our Lord. Well, today is Friday of the 32nd week of Ordinary Time. We are roughly 2 weeks and 1 day from the new liturgical year. And so, therefore, as we move closer to the end of the year, as I said before, we will be looking at themes having to do with the end times. Now, for this week, we looked a little bit at it, but obviously we were also looking at the celebration of the Lateran Basilica. We were looking at Pope Gregory. So we saw some of that as well. Well, one of the things that we're looking at today is from the Gospel of Luke, which is the Gospel, of course, we're looking at this year. By the way, in 2 weeks, we start looking at the Gospel of Matthew. But every time I hear this reading, I think of 9/11. And not so much of the incident, but it really reflects on exactly what happened on 9/11. And we talk about the difference between 9/10/2001 and 9/11/2001, which of course were two radically different times. As a matter of fact, the world has never been the same that it was on the 10th of September after that day, after those planes hit the World Trade Center. Now, what am I talking about? Well, this is where Jesus talks to the people and says that as it was in the days of Noah, the people will be eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. They were doing all this stuff up until the day that Noah entered the ark. And then the flood came and destroyed them all. Well, we can look back at that and say everything was just normal, regular, everything else right up until the planes hit the World Trade Center. So everything was the same up until that time. Of course, the difference is there was a warning. And the warning was, number one, that they were walking down the wrong path and that they knew it, but they didn't pay attention to it anymore. And secondly, there's this guy Noah building this ark. That's kind of a dead giveaway if you ask me. But you see those two things that happened, those two differences. And we see the same thing with Sodom and Gomorrah. He describes on the same thing. And he says, so it will be on the day the Son of Man is revealed, that everything will change. But Paul tells us elsewhere in the Bible but there will be signs. And Jesus actually tells us as well, there will be signs, and those who can understand the signs will understand to be ready. And of course, that is the theme for this time of the year, to be ready, to be prepared, to know that the Lord is coming, and so always be ready. One of the things that is part of this time to think of is to always be ready in case the Lord calls you tonight, so to speak. Now, what that means is, always be ready to stand before the Lord. And so we're on that track. We always believe in that. And we don't want to walk down a path where we say, he said he was coming. He isn't coming. He hasn't been here yet. So let's assume that he's not coming, and let's eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may die. And that's always that warning that Paul gives, and Jesus does too. He says, no. Don't walk down that path. The signs will be there. And clearly, we see signs now that indicate the signs will be there. You may or may not know, but there is a man in Brazil. The Brazilians know who he is, but I'm not going to mention who he is because I think it would bring too much of a confusion. But there is a man in Brazil. He is a very holy man. He is a priest, and he believes that the Lord has told him that he will live to see the Lord come back. And he's still alive. He's well into his 80s now. And people look, they They know who he is. They listen to him, and they look to see if, in fact, this is true. At the same time, if we look over the past 20 years and we look from 9/11, that where we have been, we went from 9/11, 9/10, when everything was normal and everything was regular and everything was just the way it is. I mean, I remember that morning I was having breakfast with my sister. I was stationed at the cathedral, and I was having breakfast with my sister at a place not far from there. So this is like 8 o'clock in the morning, and not far from the cathedral is actually, if I have it right, it was almost on the, that would have been what? Is it Boylston Street or Beacon Street? Is it Boylston Street? It was on Boylston Street down near the Trinity Church, for those of you who are in the Boston area, in Copley Square. And some people say it's pronounced Copley Square. Other people say it's Copley Square. I'll just say Copley Square. So anyway, that's where I was. And we had breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning. If you remember, the weather was beautiful. It was a beautiful day. And this was on 9/11. So it was the day after 9/10. And I remember I walked back to the cathedral. It's about a mile walk straight down Dartmouth Street. And by the time I got back, I believe I had a cell phone then. And I picked up the cell phone or something. I answered the cell phone. And she said, there's some story in the news about a plane hitting 9/11, a plane hitting the World Trade Center. And I was like, oh, okay, wow. So then I get to the cathedral, and I saw that the plane had hit the Pentagon. It was on the news. That's when I got in. And I was shocked. And I'll tell you why on the other side of the break. You're listening to St. Anthony Overnight from St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts, right here on WEZE. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. I want to call your attention to Catholic TV, which offers great faith-filled, family-friendly programming 24 hours a day. You can find your cable channel at www.getcatholictv.com, and you can watch online on the free apps or check out the YouTube channel. Daily Mass, Rosaries, the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and the Our Lady of Perpetual Help Novena are all available online and on demand. Check out CatholicTV.com. And don't forget our own website, CatholicAudiomedia.com, CatholicAudiomedia.com. Don't forget, by the way, you can connect to the parish there, and when you do that, remember, you have a standing invitation to our 10 o'clock a.m. Mass every single Sunday. So come check that out, CatholicAudiomedia.com. So we are talking about that event in light of the gospel. One of the things that I mentioned, I said, and I saw the Pentagon, that the plane had hit the Pentagon on 9/11, and I was shocked. Well, why was I so shocked, besides the obvious, a plane had hit the Pentagon? Because when I grew up, we had all that mythology about the United States, and this was in the 1960s, and I was told the Pentagon was an indestructible building. So, which, for a sense, I mean, it really survived an intense destruction. But I was taught that. So when I saw that these planes had hit and destroyed part of the Pentagon, I'm like, but the Pentagon's an indestructible building. It broke that mythology there for me right away. So I was shocked. And that kind of reality where everything changes almost instantly this is what Jesus is talking about. People are going to be living their life normally, and he talks about it in light of Sodom and Gomorrah. There was a study that found that what happened with Sodom and Gomorrah, if you were looking at it from a scientific perspective, was that a meteorite had come, or obviously a huge meteorite, maybe an asteroid, had come and had exploded several, I think maybe 2,000 feet above the ground, maybe not that far above the ground, which is the worst form of explosion. And it had the same kind of effect as Hiroshima did, maybe worse. And this is what biblical archaeologists have studied, that this is what happened, that this meteorite had exploded, creating about the same amount of damage. And again, it would have been a situation of everything's fine at this moment, and then all of a sudden everything changes. So Jesus is talking about that reality in the case of Noah. He's talking about that reality, but the signs would also be there. And then he says to us, look for the signs. Have you ever seen the movie Apocalypto? There's a kind of another example of that on a different level. But if you ever see the movie, which I'd recommend to you, a fascinating story about the last days of the Mayan Empire. And so what happens, well, maybe I shouldn't give away the ending, but you see this ending, which is less dramatic than what I just described to you. But you realize this world, their world, has just dramatically changed. And this is what Jesus is talking about. People are going to live as if everything is normal, everything is the way they have it, they're in charge, the whole bit. But when Jesus comes back, everything will be different. But the believers will know to be ready. And that's the call that we have as a message, be ready, because Jesus will come back. Now, I talked to you about that priest in Brazil who, as I said, is still alive. And people are asking the question. In the meantime, here we are. And I know people have been giving, warnings for a while and saying this could be the time, but people have been saying that for 2,000 years. But for the first time in the history of the human race, we are talking seriously about the use of nuclear weapons. And even during the Cuban Missile Crisis, that kind of talk wasn't done to the level it's done today. And we're going that if that happens, the world changes again. Have yourself a blessed day, and we will see you again on Monday. We'll see you then. If you would like to support our program, please consider a donation to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. There are several ways to consider this. One is to purchase any of our merchandise, which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. There are coffee mugs there. There's also my latest book, Encounter Christ in Your Humanity, all of which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can also donate to the show directly through either the Donate tab, also at CatholicAudiomedia.com, or by sending a donation through the U.S. Postal Service with your questions and comments at 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. That's St. Anthony Parish, 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. Finally, the best way you can support our parish is to attend Mass on Sundays at 10 o'clock and be a part of our parish. We thank you for any support you would like to give to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts, the sponsoring parish for this media outreach to Catholics and other Christians in the WROL, WEZE, and podcast listening audience. In Cristo vivimos.